when I first read uh Communist Manifesto, this section here is the shit that jumped out to me the most. I was like, what? This sounds like this shit is happening right now. But let me explain. Let me back it up a little bit and explain. Let's go back to here. I think this is where it is.
Of modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself in the modern representative state.
My bad. I did not go back far enough here.
It's the nobility, and, in fact, cornerstone of the great monarchies in general. The bourgeoisie has, at last,
So here's where we're starting the concept that we're going to be discussing here. The bourgeoisie has at last, since the establishment of modern industry and of the world market,
since the establishment of modern industry and of the world market, conquered for itself, in the modern representative state, exclusive political sway.
doesn't that sound like what the state of the United States right this very second? Conquered in itself in the modern representative state, meaning the modern representative government, and that's what we have, exclusive political sway. And they're describing the bourgeoisie, or they, that is correct. They're describing the bourgeoisie, the donor class, what we call the ruling class now. Exclusive political sway. Wouldn't you describe that's the situation we have right now? It's not that we have some political sway, the average worker. It's that the donors have literally exclusive. When you have an 80% or something like that, 80, 79, 81, 80% support, and that's conservative, that's all political stripes, 80% support for some sort of universal healthcare or single payer healthcare system, and it hasn't happened immediately. How was that? Because the bourgeoisie has conquered in itself in the modern representative state exclusive political sway. The executive of the modern state, meaning the Mitch McConnells, the Kevin McCarthy's, the Chuck Schumers, the Nancy Pelosi's, even the Joe Bidens and the presidents, the executive of the modern state, the elected leaders he's speaking of, is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. They're just here managing what the donor class, what the ruling class wants done. Isn't that what we say all the time? So like I said, this is the section when I first read, I was like, what the fuck? When I first read this section right here, I still have flashbacks when I first read it. But let's continue. I may come back to this though. I like this part.
The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie historically has played a most revolutionary part. The bourgeoisie, wherever it has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound men to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment.
It's another great section to read. Go back a little more right here.
The executive of the modern state is but a committee for managing the common affairs of the whole bourgeoisie. The bourgeoisie historically has played a most revolutionary part. The bourgeoisie, wherever it has got the upper hand, has put an end to all feudal, patriarchal, idyllic relations. It has pitilessly torn asunder the motley feudal ties that bound men to his natural superiors, and has left remaining no other nexus between man and man than naked self-interest, than callous cash payment. It has drowned the most heavenly ecstasies of religious fervour, of chivalrous enthusiasm, of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy waters of egotistical calculation.
Mm.
It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and, in place of the numberless and feasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single, unconscionable freedom, free trade. In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honoured and looked up to with reverent awe.
This, oh, I thought I was on mute. This point right here, the bourgeoisie, let's put it in current terms, the ruling class, the donor class, has stripped of its halo, has stripped of any sort of good name, every occupation honored and looked upon with any awe or reverence. They've gotten every occupation to sell out. You see Dr. Fauci? So this quote here is another one. So we're in the section of the Communist Manifesto where it made me want to read more and push forward through this, because I'm not a person that reads 500-page books. Not that this one's not one, but I'm not reading a 500-page book. It would take a lot for me to read that. But this book was one where I got to this part, I was like, wow, this made me a lot more interested in reading the rest. And I rewinded back maybe 20 seconds. Let's continue.
Of Philistine sentimentalism in the icy waters of egotistical calculation. It has resolved personal worth into exchange value, and, in place of the numberless and feasible chartered freedoms, has set up that single, unconscionable freedom, free trade.
Yeah.
In one word, for exploitation, veiled by religious and political illusions, naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation.
This to me is a description of the United States in one word for exploitation, veiled by religious. We pretend to be very religious as a country, and we don't have a religious bone in existence in our country. And then political illusions or lies or propaganda, naked, shameless, direct, brutal exploitation. And you see that in things like the earthquake in Syria without the lifting of sanctions. So, yeah. So you may hear some noise. My wife is in the room. So, yeah. She's not the quietest. That's why I always have to say that. All right. So let's continue. Yeah.
The bourgeoisie has stripped of its halo every occupation hitherto honoured and looked up to with reverent awe. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science, into its wage labourers.
Dr. Fauci comes to mind, and we don't even have to talk about lawyers and priests. I mean, you got this part right here is another part that rings so true today. It has converted the physician, the lawyer, the priest, the poet, the man of science into its paid wage laborers. Experts are now just, I'm paid to say whatever and use my credentials as an expert to get people to believe what I've been paid to sell. There you go. So what I like to do when I'm reading this, and you've already noticed this, is that when I'm reading this book, I like to stop and then apply it to what's today, because this book feels like a lot of it is talking about today, because it is talking about the contradictions of capital which still exists.